Welcome to Reddit Aliens. People who have experienced scary, creepy moments. What were they like? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I moved into a new place around 15 and kept hearing scratching noises and rustling outside. I always assumed it was animals. One year we had to put up some defense on the window, don't remember why, and my father said the grass and bushes around my window were like how a carpet is after you step on it, and he said that the tracks belonged to either a human or something with human feet. This was years after the first time I heard the rustling and scratching. To know that someone was outside my window still terrifies me. A couple of weeks after my first husband died, I woke up one night and heard the floorboards in my son's bedroom make a noise. Suddenly he started laughing. He was 2 and started shouting, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," and he started talking about his day, what he did and what he ate. I went to his room to see what he was doing, and he was in his baby bed, couldn't have gotten out, and was stretching out his arms as to be picked up, and we were talking to the corner of his room. Driving on the highway in Ontario, Canada late that night, we pulled over off the highway so one of us could make a pit stop. As my friend was urinating, I saw a tall figure in the trees walking around. It started getting closer to my friend, who was just off the highway in the bush. I rolled down the window and told my friend, "There's something in the trees coming at you, get back to the car." My friend sees it and decides to whistle at it. Sure enough, the thing whistles back. It sounded like it was whistling and humming at the same time. My friend yelled in terror and ran back to the car. We were out of there fast down the highway. When I went to stay with my uncle for the weekend, we took his dog for a walk 3 times a day, once in the morning, once before lunch, and once at like 10 to 11 p.m. So he lives in a rural area of England, like lots of farms, tight country lanes, and at night it gets very dark. So we come along to a small fence. He lifts the dog over, and I just hop over, as I'm pretty tall. We start walking along and end up in an orchard. As it gets darker, I turn my phone light on and look around. I feel as if something is watching me, but could feel it was quite close. I look to the left, and down the aisles of trees, I see something very tall and humanoid walk past, as if it was following me and my uncle. I turned to him and said, "Did you see that too?" And I point to the trees, and he replied with, "Kinda, yeah." We carry on walking, and get to near the end. He sees the trees sway, as do I. The humanoid being was watching us. It must have been at least 8 feet tall. It was staring back at us, and as the dog started barking in its direction, the being walked off after the dog stopped barking. My family and I saw a woman staring into a window once. It was late at night, past midnight. We live in a remote little town called Salton City. There are many houses that had halted construction midway. This was one of those houses. The woman was wearing a long white dress and had long straight black hair, very stereotypical of a horror movie. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it, and my parents do not talk about it to this day. They're religious people, and I think this really freaked them out. One afternoon during my senior year in high school, a friend of mine and I were hanging out on my back porch. I forgot which of us noticed at first, but we saw a cylindrical-shaped spinning object traversing the sky. It was low enough so that we could clearly see its shape and color, white, but made no sound whatsoever. My friend actually tried to call the airport and ask them if they saw any anomaly, which of course they didn't, so who knows what that thing was. So UFOs, if you think they're real, do you think they are from another planet, or do you think it's just some experimental government stuff that we don't know about? My wife and another couple and I were driving on a curvy road one night, and I turned a sharp left, and what I saw was a woman covered in blood, wearing a white beat-up dress. She was in the middle of the road, so I swerved and landed in someone's yard. I thought I was going crazy, yet before I said anything, everyone in the car yelled, "Did you see that?" At that point, I knew I wasn't seeing shit. We all got out, and there wasn't a soul in sight. We ended up calling the cops, because we couldn't accept that it was a ghost or some paranormal crap. I'm still spooked till this day. So when I was about 9 to 10 years old, my family had to make it to an early morning flight. It was about 4 or 5 a.m., and I was just looking out the windows, when all of a sudden, we stopped at a red light, and there was a person in brown robes with a scarecrow-looking mask just staring at us. I was the only one who noticed, and we just drove away, but he kept on staring and eventually walked off. Not particularly supernatural or anything, but I still think about it a lot. Back in the late 80s, we went on a field trip in the rural Midwest to a lake. We spent a day hiking, fishing, sunbathing, whatever. However, on the way there, we were on a school bus on a backcountry road. There were two cylindrical-shaped or cigar-shaped things in the sky. They looked metallic. They were quite some distance away, but they looked effing massive. Like a half a dozen large passenger planes end-to-end type massive. Probably bigger than that. I grew up on the ocean and am fully aware without a frame of reference, it is tough to judge size and distance of large objects. The surface looked to have shading and slight differences in appearance, like maybe the object wasn't smooth, but no wings or other aircraft features. The only frame of reference I had was a big-ass hill. These things were behind the hill and seemed just as big. The funny thing is, everyone saw them, but no one wanted to acknowledge it. For a second, I thought I was seeing shit and was going to ask the kid next to me if he saw it, but I looked and saw him staring at them. I asked him what they were and got a shrug and I don't know. I wish there was a cool ending, like we were shot at by lasers or we were abducted and forced to fight to the death, but we just drove and eventually they were out of sight. What were they? I have no idea. I've never seen anything that size in the sky before or since, much less two of them. I've worked at racetracks and seen blimps overhead, and that isn't even close for size. I've worked at airports, and even the biggest planes aren't close. The science part of me will always wonder what those were, but the rational part of me knows I'll never find the answer. I live next to a railway crossing, and when I was around 10, they installed floodlights on the crossing and they shone directly into my window so I could always see silhouettes of the trees or something very clearly like a puppet show. One night, I had a sleepover with two friends. At some point during the night, a figure appeared crouching in my window. My friends and I were terrified. In the point of context, there's nothing outside my window for anyone to stand on. The figure also had elongated body parts. The part I remember most was a pointy head. It stayed crouched in the window for a while and we hid under the covers and peeped out occasionally. Sometime later, we saw it jump to the side. I put this down to a dream. It couldn't have been real. The floodlight eventually got turned so it didn't face my window. My friends and I grew up and grew apart. At the end of secondary school, I was getting people to sign my yearbook, and one of the girls asked me if I remembered the thing in my window. I was shocked. I thought it was a dream. So I asked the other girl, and she also remembered it. That night I told my dad about it. He told me the floodlights have never faced my window. Well, my English is not very good, but I try my best. I live in a house with 2 stages. I sleep in the first stage. I was alone, and it was night when I suddenly heard somebody above walking. I got out of my room and said, "Hello." I thought maybe my parents are back and I haven't heard them, but nobody answered, and the noises stopped. So I walked back into my room. 1 minute later, I heard again, walking above, but this time it got much scarier, because out of nowhere the TV was working. I don't get scared very fast, so I walked upstairs and closed the TV. But then, when I was again in my room, I heard that the TV was back on. I walked again upstairs and wanted to close again the TV, but when I was in front of the TV, it closed itself. In this moment, I had the goosebumps of my life, and I just ran downstairs. Good job. Early 2000s. I'm in Cub Scouts, the elementary school version of Boy Scouts, on a camping trip. I'm about 10ish around that time. I wake up quite late at night and need to pee. The bathrooms are a little ways away, and I don't want to walk to them, so I walk over to the wooded area and start peeing on a tree, like you do. I'm about done when I notice a large figure standing in front of me. This thing is majorly tall. I would have put it at 9 to 11 feet tall. It had pure black face that looked like it could pull you in if you looked too long. And the weird thing is, I wasn't scared. I felt perfectly safe around this thing. I asked it if it was going to hurt me, and it didn't make a sound. It reached out and handed me a light gray rock. That is what I assumed to be concrete, which is strange considering that the only source of concrete was a road over a mile away. I think I blacked out or something because I have no memory of returning to my tent, only waking up there. I think it was some weird fever dream until I get home. I'm looking for clothes to put into the wash, and there, sitting at the bottom of the bag, is the rock. Not really a silhouette, But when my grandfather passed away, I took his watch. As I took it, I noticed that it was loose, so I decided to tighten it by removing specific parts. While I was, a rusty small nail stung my finger, and I threw the nail on the ground in a panic. After that, I started searching for it on the ground, but eventually gave up because it was so small. After I completed my fixing part, I left the house, and when I came back, the little nail was there on the table, which I was fixing the watch. Felt wholesome. Okay, I haven't shared this story with anyone other than family before. So about a year before I was born, my parents got a Rottweiler named Rufus. Rufus was still a pup when they got him, and apparently while my mom was pregnant with me, he refused to leave her side no matter what. He would lose his shit if she left the house without him. Clearly knew she was pregnant. She told me that from the day I was born, he would stick to me like glue, sleeping in my parents' room next to my crib as a baby. And when I got moved into my own room, the first couple of nights they closed the door, but he would scratch at the door and whimper, being restless until they eventually gave up and let him sleep in my room with me. Now, I would get scared of the dark, but my parents always told me Rufus was there to keep me safe. And since my bed was very high off the ground, he would crawl under it and sleep there sometimes, especially when fireworks went off or during a huge thunderstorm. One day, we'd attempted home invasion. The burglars didn't get far as they were met by Rufus breaking in. He did a number on them, but unfortunately didn't survive. Enough of a number to get them to run for it. From there on, now and then, when I slept with my door closed, I'd hear the clawing and the whimpering again. It would always persist until I get up out of bed and then it would stop. And one night during a pretty big storm, my mom came in to check on me and told me she could have sworn she saw a tail sticking out from under the bed. We didn't get a new dog for a year or two after that, and about a year in, we had some house guests, and their child was very allergic to dogs. As they stayed over for the night, the kid was to sleep in my room with me, but whenever he came in, his allergies would flare up like crazy, only in my room. I still hear the scratching and whimpering to this day, and I'm convinced Rufus has become a sort of guardian angel for me. I love that dog. Rufus is and was always a good boy. We all deserve something as good as that. As a kid, I used to hate going to bed because almost every night shadowy figures would watch me sleep only when I had my back turned and was facing the wall, or I would hear whispers and noises from my closet. I would feel something watching me, so every time I would turn around in bed to see what it was already a shadowy figure standing there watching me sleep, but it would run to my closet once I looked at it. It had footsteps as well. Other times it covered myself completely in a blanket. Kid me thought it actually worked, lol. I could feel something gently touching me as if to scare me. I would uncover myself from the blanket and nothing would be there. I shared a room with my grandmother, so I would wake her up and tell her what I saw, terrified out of my kid mind. She would just tell me it was an after-image projection from the TV, LMAO. I would go some nights without sleeping because of this, but would still hear whispers from my closet. I've had sleep paralysis before, plus I usually always figure it out and wake up right away. But these incidents sure as hell felt really effing different. I could move around and talk. Another time, I heard evil snickering from my closet. I knew where everyone in my house was. Small house. No idea what the hell that was either. Like 8 years ago, I lived in an attic in a Michigan home, and I constantly had things happen there that I can't explain. One time I had an extremely vivid dream, which is rare for me because I'm a restless sleeper, that a baseball was floating at me very slowly. In this dream, everything was in slow motion, and all I could focus on was the baseball coming towards me. Once the baseball made contact with me, I woke up in my bedroom, and my dog's rope toy came flying across the room and hit me in the chest. When I looked over in that direction, the room was pitch black. However, there were 3 sets of windows in the room, and it always had moonlight illuminate it to a certain degree. I called to my dog because it's totally like him to want to play at weird hours, but he was at my side. Another time, I felt someone crawl into bed and lay next to me like they were about to spoon me. The weight, or whatever it was, literally shifted the bed around. When I finally mustered the courage to roll over and see what crawled into bed, there was nothing there. I was close friends with the girl that previously lived in that room before me, and she said she had experienced this more than on one occasion.